Hey, Professor K here, and today we're going to learn how to start adding CSS to your HTML documents. Now there's 3 different ways that you can do this. I'm going to show you the recommended way first, and then I'm going to show you some ways that I wouldn't recommend adding CSS to your HTML documents and why they don't work, why they're not a best practice. So let's start with the best practice first. Right here I have a couple of example files. In index.html, that's usually the first page that you land on in a website, as well as a rabbits.html. And the way that these 2 pages are related is I have them in a navigation, home and rabbits. You can see those over here in the navigation HTML and using hyperlink tag to link to index.html for home and rabbits.html for rabbits. And what I want you to notice is that when I click on each over here, it will take us to different pages with different images. So the content is a little bit different on each, but largely if we take a look even at the code, most of it's the same. It's the same look and feel, it's the same title and image structure. So one thing that you might immediately want to do when you start putting in your HTML, especially with images, is to try to scale your image size down. See how you can't see the rabbit right now? It's way too big. The best way to do this is by using an external style sheet and the link attribute. So what we're going to do is, to start with, we are going to create a new file and we are going to call it style.css. You can name it whatever you want as long as it ends with CSS, but style.css is a good pattern for anything that is styling a whole site in general. So let's add this file. And now this is here. And in order to make the connection between this CSS file and the HTML file, we need to do what's called linking it. So let's see what that looks like. For that, you use the link attribute or the link element. And there is an attribute that will tell you what the kind of link is. And source equals style.css. So now that we have this style sheet and source, this page should be able to make the connection to this style.css. So I'm going to write a really simple rule to make sure that that worked. I'm going to try targeting this H1 element, selecting it, and then making it red. So here we're going to write our very first simple CSS rule, just to test this out, just to debug. This is my favorite debugging rule. H1, color, red. And it's not working. This didn't become red at all. So maybe I've got something wrong here. What could I have possibly done wrong? So sometimes I just like to look things up, and I usually use developer.mozilla.org. Oh, and you know what I messed up? It's not a source. We need to use an href attribute, and our rel is style sheet. So let's see if I got that right. Link rel equals style sheet. Now we just need it to be an href instead. Oh, look at that. Now it's red. So that's one thing that you're going to want to do, right? Is sometimes you're not going to be able to remember everything off the top of your head. Even if you've been doing this for 10 plus years, you might not remember the exact syntax for everything. That's okay. Something doesn't work as expected. Your first step should always be go Google it. Go see if the code that you wrote matches what is actually supposed to be happening. And I'll bet you something didn't work. So if this is working correctly, one of the great things about this approach to CSS is that as long as the connection is made on the page, it should always apply very consistently to any H1 element we see. So let's see if this happens on our rabbits page. Okay, when we click on rabbits, it doesn't show that. So if we go to rabbits.html, there is an H1 there, but you know what's missing is that link tag. So if we go over back to our index.html, copy this link element and paste it in the head of rabbits.html. Now you can see this is refreshed and right now it's showing index.html, so that's why that looked a little weird and why it refreshed. But if we click on rabbits, it now has the red on a rabbit. So now the changes are happening in both places. Perfect. So at this point, I don't actually want this color red rule. Let's take a closer look at the CSS to understand what's happening, what I just wrote. This here, this H1, is a selector. What a selector does in CSS is it allows us to make a connection between our CSS and a specific piece of the HTML page. So we've said the pieces of the HTML page that we want are H1s. We want all of the H1 elements. This is an element selector. Next, we have curly braces. That's how you start and end a CSS rule. And finally, we have a property and value pair. A property is something that you want to change in CSS. So color, width, transition, animation, something you want to set, that's a property. And the value is what you want it to set to. As you're writing property and value pairs, remember that syntax is really important. The syntax for CSS is colon after your property and semicolon after your value. So those are the important kind of breakdown pieces to know about a CSS rule. With that in mind, I want to try and write a rule that targets this image instead of the H1. So now that we know this works, we can delete this rule. And if we go over here and look at our preview and click on rabbits, you can notice that it deletes the color from this H1 as well. One of the great benefits to doing your CSS this way is anywhere where you create that relationship, all of the rules will apply. So it makes it really easy to manage all the styles across multiple pages. Let's write a rule that selects our image element and sizes it down so that we can see it. So based on what you just learned, think for a moment, how would you select this image element? If we use the H1 to select an H1, how could we select all image elements? Hopefully you thought that through and you said, well, why don't I just try typing IMG? The next thing that we need, now that we've selected the image element, is our curly brace pair, just like that. Hit return to get a new line. And now we're going to think about what is the thing we want to change with CSS. Usually what you want to change is pretty close to the actual CSS property. So I want to change width, and if I add a colon and a semicolon, now all I need is some sort of value to go in here. And just to test it out, I'm going to set it to some number of pixels, 100 pixels. And now you can see that's resized. And now we can see our rabbits. And in fact, if we go to the rabbits page, now that one is resized too. And all we had to do was change our rule in one place. So this is a fantastic way to write CSS. I would highly recommend keeping all of your styles in a separate style sheet. This is called separation of concerns, separating your content from your styles. And it makes it really easy to take your styles and reapply them if your content changes. So this is definitely the best way to do it. Now the two other ways that you could do it are to literally write the styles in a style tag, style type equals text / CSS. And just for demonstration's sake, I'm going to go back to my H1 and I'm going to write a rule to color it red. And notice that this is in index.html. Here's where you start to see the detriments of writing CSS in this way. If we go to rabbits.html over here in our preview, we don't get the color red over here. So when you write CSS in this way, what you're really doing is making it really easy to lose consistency. So you're really always going to want to write CSS in a separate file. The third and final way that you can use is literally styling the element itself. So going to your HTML element, there actually is a style attribute, style equals, and then remember, double quotes for any attribute you use. And then if you paste in a rule like this, color equals red, that will style just that H1. If we were to say have another H1 and then style that, that wouldn't have the red like this one does because this is specific to this H1. And in fact, if we wrote a style tag up here, style type equals text / CSS, and then wrote another rule, H1 color blue, what would win? Notice that only one H1 turns blue, but this one, the red H1 with the style attribute directly on it, overrides this style up here with the H1 color blue. This is one reason why it's really not good to write your styles in this way. So I would definitely recommend against using either the style tag or the style attribute. They're very hard to override for a reason that's called specificity. Basically, there are certain levels of specificity in CSS rules where if there's a conflict between two rules, over here the H1 says it should be blue, and over here the H1 says it should be red, CSS needs to make a decision about which one it should render as. And it's always going to go with the most specific one, the one that applies to the least amount of elements. And in the case of an inline style, that's always going to win. So that's really not great. So that's everything you need to know about starting to style HTML and CSS and getting CSS connected to your documents. All you have to do is make sure that you have that link rule. That's very important. If you don't have a style that you're expecting to showing up, that would be the first thing to check. Did I add my link tag in the head of the HTML document? The second thing is to double check that your naming is right in your file name. So for example, I'm looking for style.css, and I want to make sure that my file is actually called style.css and that it's in the same sort of place as the HTML. Finally, look at your CSS selector. What are you selecting on the page? Today we only went over element selectors, but in the next couple of videos we're going to talk about different types of selectors that will help you select more HTML elements on the page and get more specific about how you can actually write styles for everything on the page. So with that, I hope this helps, and I will see you later.